But again, thank you all so much for being here. Really appreciate it. I mean, I did not expect by any means this large of a group, but TikTok and social media did its thing. So I'm so happy to have y'all here on at least for our first session. So if you registered for one part of the series, then the good news is you are registered for all four parts. This is going to be, like I mentioned, a 4-part series. And so today we're going to start things off with just like grounding with a basic understanding of what in the crap has gone on in our minds, brains, and bodies over the last few years to get so many of us to this point of feeling so burnt out. This is not something that we can just talk about for an hour and be done with it and be on our merry way. There's a lot to talk about here and a lot to unpack when it comes to the root causes of stress and mindset. But again, the first part of today is all about awareness, because the bottom line is you cannot solve a problem when we're not aware of the root cause, when we're just addressing a side effect or a symptom, right? Coming aware of the real source, then we can use that knowledge to really make some impactful and meaningful long-term change over the next several weeks. So again, today begins part 1. Feel free, I'll let you know if I can get the chat fixed. It's just me in here today, so we may need to use the Q&A and I'll fix it for next time, but feel free to use the Q&A in case you have any questions that come up or if you want to share anything. And then just an FYI as well, this is being recorded and it'll be sent out to everybody that attended, as well as, in the case that you need to drop off early or what have you, just know that you'll receive the recording as well to whatever email that you registered with. So a quick bit about me. For those of you that may not know me or that kind of registered for this on a whim, my name is Peter Goose, and I started my career in the classroom. I used to be a 5th and 6th grade teacher. So if we've got any teachers in the crowd, my whole heart is with you. You are the true heroes. And so did that for several years. I was reading intervention specialist, and then I hit my first round of burnout. Yes, teachers in the house, Thales, great to have you here. And then so I left the classroom, and then I started working for a company that did brain-based learning for school districts, as well as students. And so that's where I first kind of got into the fascinating science of the brain and got obsessed with neuropsychology. Went on from that career path to then working for big companies like Amazon and training and development, small little ed tech startups. I became a corporate junkie, for lack of a better term. And it got me addicted to stress. As many of you might be able to resonate with, I started climbing the corporate ladder and I was like, I want to get the raise. I want to get the promotion, right? I want to get that next big thing in my life. And so bottom line is I got addicted to stress as a way to prove my value until COVID hit and the pandemic. And I know this is very similar for a lot of us as well, too, is that when the pandemic came about, it allowed us to really slow down and take into consideration, like, what the fuck am I doing with my life, right? And so for me, the realization was I wasn't happy. Like, I didn't hate my job, but I just knew deep down that I was like meant for something more. And so I became a member of the good old Great Resignation back in January of 2022, quit my full-time job. And I didn't really know what I was going to do yet. I just know that I needed a break for myself before I decided what I was going to do. And I had always been into brain science. And then also the kind of this next part here, neuro-linguistic programming, which I'm a certified practitioner in as well. That kind of gets into the mindset piece of things. But yeah, I was like, how do I put this into a framework that can be useful to others? And then in June of last year, I was like, all right, I know I'm 37 years old, but maybe I should jump on TikTok and try out that whole thing. And I just started sharing my journey of being a burnt out millennial and the journey of kind of going through doing some of this inner work that's oftentimes brutal and sharing that with others. And did not expect it to blow up the way that it did, but apparently a lot of other people really resonated. And so that kind of led me on to the path where I am today. I'm the founder of the Millennial Reset. This is my little baby that I birthed over the last several months. And so how was it born? How was the Millennial Reset born? Well, first of all, I was obsessed with this whole concept of like, why are millennials burning out so much more and so much faster than any other generation? I was very, very curious about this. Like, what is it about that? And of course, I knew from my own experience as well, but I was like, what's the mindset piece of this? So I really started digging into that. And one thing that I realized is that there was a lot of people out there that were talking about burnout prevention. Like, here are all these tips and tricks to prevent burnout in the workplace. But it was crickets. It was silence when it came to burnout recovery. And I'm like, wait a second, corporate America and like work world, that whole burnout prevention ship has sailed. We've hit the brick wall officially. We need something to recover. And so along with that, people that were talking about burnout recovery, there was a lot of talk around regulating our nervous system. I'm sure you probably have seen a lot of this too online, but there wasn't a whole lot of conversation around the mindset piece because yes, you can do yoga, you can do meditation, you can do exercise all day long, every day. And those are great habits to regulate your nervous system. But if you're not getting to the root cause of those subconscious beliefs that are driving our unconscious behaviors and getting us to that place of unconscious stress addiction, well, then you can do whatever you want to empty your cup. But then the moment that you're stressed back out again, your cup is right back to full again. So I was like, okay, maybe I'm onto something here with this. And then I think the biggest piece, and really where I'm at today with it all, is that we have all these options out there, like memberships to the gym to take care of our physical health. But aside from therapy, there's not a whole lot out there in terms of like ongoing, sustainably taking care of your mental health. There was like this huge disconnect between physical and mental health. And I'm like, well, that's not okay with me. So that's where I am today with the Millennial Reset, is a membership program, a community of support. We'll kind of talk a little bit more about this at the end as well today, of just having a place where you don't have to worry if you have health insurance or not. You just coming to a space to be able to learn about your brain and ways that you can train your mind and brain yourself in order to quite simply create the life that you desire and deserve. So that's kind of gotten me to where I am right now. Before we dive into our first session here today, I just want to kind of set a little groundwork for y'all as well. Number one is I'm not a licensed therapist. I get this question all the time from people. They're like, can you be my therapist? And I'm like, no. I'm not a licensed therapist. And so, sorry, y'all, I finally just fixed the chat as well. So we should be good to go. The difference here between like therapy and coaching, right, is that when you're sitting down with a therapist, and don't get me wrong, I am a huge proponent of therapy, right? But it's not for everybody. The therapist guides you through this experience and you experience the strategy that they use with you, right? But as a mindset coach, and quite frankly, I like to think about myself as like a teacher. I'm just a teacher that is here to be able to give you the insight into how your brain and mind and body work together so that you can use the strategies that you're going to learn over these next several weeks to help yourself without having to worry about making an appointment with a therapist or paying some absorbent amount of money that some of these coaches online are charging for, monthly coaching sessions or one-time sessions, right? So that's how I see myself, is giving you the knowledge and tools so that you not only learn the how you can help yourself, but you learn why the strategies work. The next thing is, let's get clear on the big difference here between fault and responsibility. The big thing here is that I myself include myself in this bunch of people, is that it's so easy to get ourselves into a mode where we blame. We say it's society that got us here. It's our parents that taught us a certain way that didn't work out for us, right? And the bottom line is, where we are today is not our fault, right? However, stress is a natural part of life. And there are, unfortunately, certain things that we absolutely cannot control in our environment. We can only control our response to those things. And so we're going to be highly, highly focused on letting go of fault and embracing responsibility, taking back the power and control. Number 3, the main causes of burnout. This is super important because by all means, burnout can happen for a variety of reasons. And one of the big reasons, teachers, nurses, social workers in the house, you know what I'm talking about here, is environmental burnout, where your work environment causes you chronic stress, okay? That's one main cause. But the thing is, we can't control our environment, right? Our environment is our environment. We're kind of stuck with that until we decide to leave that and go to a different environment, right? So what we're going to talk about are the causes of burnout that we can control, which primarily is going to be rooted in the mindset piece of things, of what are the default programs that are running unconsciously in our minds that are causing us to behave and to think and act in a certain way that keeps us running on stress all the time, right? And then the last thing here that I just want to get really clear on again is out of control versus in our control. Again, we could lament all day, every day on all of the different things that really suck right now in our world. But if we focus on those things in our outer world, the question becomes, what if it never changes? What if nobody or nothing is coming to rescue us? And so instead, again, we're going to focus on what we can control. And instead of waiting on some external circumstance to change and wasting our energy on that, we're going to focus our energy on creation mode, creating your desired reality and getting ourselves out of this icky place of burnout. Cool, cool? If you guys have any questions, like I said, I think the chat should be working. Let me just double check it again. Yeah, attendees can chat with everybody now. So you should be good to go to use the chat now. But of course, if you have any questions as we're going along, you can also put them in the Q&A. So part one today, a framework for understanding how we got here. And a good way to understand this is thinking about all the way back to 0 years old. And so most scientists would agree, by all means, that most of our programming, or another way to say this is that our brains are most malleable from 0 to 10 years old. In this time, we are watching others around us, observing and modeling the behavior of others to create our sense of reality and our sense of identity. And so if you think about, especially for us millennials, if it all comes down to like one word, from 0 to 10 years old, our parents, our society, the education system programmed us for competition, right? Because society and our parents thought at the time that the way to success was compete in school, get really good grades, compete in sports, do all of the different things, right? Overwhelm your schedule. Go to college, get that 4-year degree. We were programmed to compete because they thought that that's what it was going to take for what they thought the future of our world was going to be. And then, of course, as we grow up, those beliefs then become hardwired as we begin to focus on those and pay attention to those things more. Because beliefs are simply just repeated thought patterns. And so beliefs that come up for us that have been programmed even since our young childhood is people around us telling us messages that rest is lazy, right? That there's always more to be done, and that success only comes from lots of hard work and a college degree from a reputable university that you're going to pay tens of thousands of dollars for. And if you feel stressed, don't talk about your feelings because mental health is bad. These were just some, right, of the beliefs that were hardwired in us as millennials. And so Vashti, you say in the chat, this is why I don't know how to relax. Exactly. It's because it's been driven by this subconscious, many times even unconscious belief that has stemmed from our growing up. So if you guys can think of any others, put them in the chat, or you can also, again, use the Q&A. What are maybe some of those other limiting or sabotaging beliefs that you're beginning to notice about yourself that have maybe been programmed in you by society, by your parents, by the education system since birth? Andrea, you're never going to do or be enough. Yes, it's always that not enoughness. You're not skilled enough. You don't have what it takes to do X, Y, Z. And we'll talk a little bit about as we get into the next few weeks of where some of that comes from. Oh, these are good. Because behave right. Parents know better. There's someone out there who has it worse, so don't complain. Ooh, that was a big one too, right? 99% is not enough. Ooh, these are all really good. And I'm sure a lot of you, as you read the chat, can probably begin to resonate with a lot of these things. And I think somebody asked before, too, is that would it probably be because our parents had it tough growing up? Well, yeah, I was having a really great conversation with my dad a few weeks ago about like the whole concept of, why was it that you program or that you taught us that you had to go this specific path in life? And his response was basically, well, think about it, right? When we were kids, a lot of the boomers growing up, they didn't go to college because the jobs that they were applying for were just the jobs that were in our local hometowns. And so those were things that didn't necessarily even require a college degree. And so then, because there were so many boomers without that college degree, and then when they realized, oh shit, I could be making more money or doing more with my life if I had a degree, well, of course they're going to then pass along what they thought would be beneficial, because that's all they knew, right? So this guy goes back to that whole idea of fault versus responsibility. I, for a long time, did this too. I was like, well, gosh, parents, why did you program me this way? It's kind of like your fault. But they were just doing the best that they could, right? That's all they knew at the time. But here's the thing, getting back to kind of this whole idea of the beliefs between 0 to 10 years old and then getting programmed up through young adulthood. Well, especially as millennials, as we begin to grow up, drastic changes to normal day life, because the competition then became not about just competing in school and sports at a local level. The competition then became global. And with the internet, with the information overload, and not to mention unprecedented historical events one after the other, your brain cannot keep up when change happens too often and too quick. But again, our brains are doing their best to try to operate with these kind of like shaky beliefs in place. But at the same time, it's going into a state of overdrive and chaos, because not only does it not know how to operate in this new world based on previous belief systems and our past experience, but also because information overload and our access to information is increased, we're now realizing that, oh my gosh, like maybe I didn't need that college degree to learn what I learned in order and went into massive debt for, right? Yeah, I'm loving these chats as well. My dad said the other day, all I've ever wanted for my kids to be happy and healthy. And I was like, well, that's nice, but that's not what our experience was growing up. Yeah, exactly. And the thing of Maria is, it's like, yeah, it's tough, but you kind of have to be able to forgive our parents too, to say, okay, I know you're just doing the best that you could at that time. Bianca says, is this part of childhood trauma healing? Yeah, of course. And we'll talk a little bit about, as we get into the next couple of weeks, is how some of those previous experiences and memories from childhood are still living on in our unconscious minds and operating the show for us. I'm going to give you some tips in week 3 and 4 about how you can do some of the work to begin to reprogram and rescript some of those things so that old memories are no longer having such a traumatic effect and a sabotaging effect on how we want to grow in life, right? All right, so as drastic changes happened, here we are today, what, 20, 30, I'm 38 years old, so I'm an elder millennial. But today, bottom line is, these beliefs and these programs that kept us running faster, and they keep us working harder to try to prove our worth. We keep working harder. We try to prove our enoughness by how much we can get done and how fast you can get it done. And now we're living in a world that has done a 180 with outdated programs running in the background. So here we are, running on empty. But of course, we never have enough time to recoup. And so this, even if we do, the same programs are still running. Even if we go on vacation, we're like, I'm going to go try to like get myself a little getaway, right? Well, the programs are still running. And we get to this point that I got to, that got me to my turning point, to my reset moment, where I said, I can't keep doing this for the next 30 to 40 years. Give me a yes in the comments if it's resonating with you so far. So the bottom line is, we crave change, but there's no user manual. There's no user manual that says, here's a new way to do it. And so guess what? This is our opportunity. Consider these next 3 weeks the potential for you to create your own new user manual. This is your chance to learn what's going on, and so that you can take meaningful action. All right. So now that we've learned a little bit about what's been going on in the mind, right? I think we need a social group. Jessica, hold on tight. Wait till the end. I'll tell you more about that. Yeah, exactly. I think the bottom line is, we just want to be able to relate to one another. So we're more aware of all the experiences and the beliefs that got us here. But I want to now make you more aware of what's been happening in the brain and body these last several years that has created this default habit and pattern of stress and burnout. And the best way to really understand this is from a scientific and even more specifically a human development perspective. So imagine, go back 20,000 years for a moment with me, and imagine that you're one of our hunter-gatherer ancestors out in the savannah, and you're trying to find food for your family, and you hear a rustle in the bushes. Oh man, what could it be? Well, it could be one of two things. It could be that there is a wild, violent tiger behind that tree ready to attack us and kill us. But it could also just be that there's a cute little baby bunny rabbit back there that is just waiting to say hello to us as we go about our day. So here's the thing about the human brain, ever since our hunter-gatherer ancestors, is that our brain is built with a negativity bias because it's better to avoid a threat than to risk a reward. So in other words, if that rustle in the bushes ends up just being a baby bunny, then hey, at least we were prepared for the worst case scenario. So this is a natural part of how our brains function. It's literal scientific research behind this whole idea of the negativity bias, where our brain is always making predictions about what might happen next in our external environment and prepares us for the worst case scenario in advance, just in case. Because again, it's better to avoid sticks than it is to approach carrots. This has always been true for us. So it's better to assume, even if it may not be true and we can't predict the future, it's better to assume that that rustle is a tiger because we're better off at that way. And so our brain is like glue for the bad and oil for the good, because it's always been much more important to remember those dangers than those positive experiences. Natalie, thank you, but I'll have to go, but I'll listen. Yeah, I'll send the recording out afterwards, Natalie. And Vashi, yes, anxiety is real for sure. But as you begin to understand what's going on in the brain with anxiety and stress, then it becomes even that much easier to be able to do things about it. So the big question then becomes, why does stress end up running our lives? So let's talk a little bit about modern day stress, right? We are no longer hunter-gatherers anymore, is the good news. And so here's the fascinating brain science of it. Anytime that we experience a negative emotion from our outside world, like fear, anxiety, or stress, or threat, there's a part of our brain called the amygdala. You can let me know in the chat if you've heard about this before. Your amygdala is this tiny, tiny little almond-shaped part of your brain that is way down there, buried deep in there. It's part of the oldest part of the human brain. And as you can tell here, it acts fast. It acts and reacts much faster to negative emotions like fear, anxiety, stress, and threat than how it would react to positive emotions like peace and joy. Because this emotional processing part of our brain processes all emotions, but it prioritizes negative emotions. Why? Well, because if we go back to that tiger and the rabbit example, right? It's much better way to prepare our bodies for fight or flight mode is to be as efficient and as effective as possible for our brain to be able to fast track those negative emotions. Because when you think about it, our brain's main job is to keep us alive and safe. And stress is just the trigger for this. It's a message to our body and brain that says, here we go. We're trying to keep you safe and alive. And stress itself, if we think about it, is the result of an emotion. And the word emotion, if you go look it up, really fascinating. It comes from the Greek word, I'm probably going to mispronounce it, but emotere. And that the original Greek word for emotion, emotere, literally means energy in motion. So you can think of stress, anxiety, whatever feeling that you're feeling, whatever emotion, you can think about it as energy in motion that's flowing through your mind and body. And so when the body runs this program of stress, the amygdala recognizes that energy in motion as stress. And how does it recognize it as stress? Well, it's based off of all of our previous experiences and all of those subconscious belief systems that we talked about just a few moments ago. And so if that experience is even remotely related to an experience in our past that has stressed us out, well, then the amygdala is going to do its job and it's going to send a message to the pituitary gland, which is our master gland in our body. And then all of these messages get sent to all of our other glands, which then release hormones like cortisol and adrenaline into the body that are all, mind you, all of these hormones are designed for two things: to help our body run faster or to fight stronger, right? The fight or flight response. And so they were designed from a human development perspective to help us survive. And these put us into that mode that we all know of fight or flight, where our sympathetic nervous system, or the fight or flight response, sends all those messages to the vital organs and the muscles to get prepared. Your heart rate increases, your breathing increases, blood pressure goes up. Oh, Andrea, that's a great burnout book recommendation. Burnoutbook.net. I'll check that out. Thank you for that. And then during this time, when all of this is happening, mind you, when we're going through a fight or flight response, well, then the emotional brain, or the amygdala, is the one that's on high alert. The thinking, logical brain turns way down because it's not a time for reflection or thinking, right? All of our energy is required at this time to survive. It's all of the, experiences associated with stress and anxiety then cause our brain to go on like this unconscious thinking mode, where instead of thinking consciously about our next step, then we just think unconsciously based on all of our past memories. It takes a shortcut by pulling up everything that it already knows from your past related to that emotion or that energy and motion, like stress. And Tanya, that's a good question that you posed too. What about freeze and fawn, right? Well, yeah, when you get into a mode where either, for example, if you go through like serious trauma, I'm not going to get into this too much in detail, but if you go through serious trauma, then people like literally freeze up because their body and their mind literally doesn't know what to do. And so it says, okay, I'm just going to freeze until we can figure out what to do. But then freeze also comes into play with burnout as well, which we'll talk about down the line with mindset, of when our cortisol and adrenaline are running on such high alert all the time that we literally don't even have the energy to put forward for fight or flight. So then we just go into this mode of just complete dissociation. So we'll talk a little bit more about that as well. But as we're going through, as we're in these fight or flight responses, and all of these things are happening in the mind and the brain and the body, and any negative emotion doesn't have to be stress either, the subconscious takes over thinking. And it activates the same neural networks in our brain that are most associated to that physiological and emotional automatic response. So if you want to go down a rabbit hole here for a moment, then our perception of what we think is reality is just a perception. It's a perception of what could possibly be happening that's driven by our automated thoughts based on those subconscious beliefs from our past. Woo! Y'all with me still? It's a lot. So again, the bottom line is, if that rustle in the bushes just happens to be a tiger, you're ready and raring to go. But if the rustle in the bushes is just a rabbit, then at least you're prepared for the worst case scenario. This is our negativity bias in action. This is our amygdala in action. We create the worst case scenario story in our mind as a way to predict our future, in a way that gives us a higher chance of survival and continued growth. Now, again, once we realize that that's just a cute little baby bunny rabbit that jumped out and we don't have to worry about tigers attacking us, then in the next, few minutes, take up to 30 minutes sometimes, then your body's going to rebalance. You're going to go back into a state of rest and relax. Your parasympathetic nervous system and your vagus nerve would be activated, taking you back into a state of balance and homeostasis. Now, here's the cool thing, is that modern day society, we don't have to worry as much about tigers and bushes. But the downside is that emotional stress, the stress that comes with the to-do list, the stress that comes with the full inbox, right? That results in the same exact automatic response as a physical stress response that was so crucial for our survival out in the savannah. The brain does not know how to tell the difference between a physical threat and an emotional threat, a physical stress or danger, and an emotional stress or danger. So the response is the exact same. And so we get into this feedback loop, this emotion-driven feedback loop, where we experience an energy and motion, stress, as an emotion, which then causes that release of hormones, which then triggers a certain neurological pathway in the brain. And then our emotional brain is on high volume, the thinking brain is on low volume. We begin to operate based on all of our unconscious thoughts and beliefs associated with that emotion and the feeling. And so when we're stressed, hormones get released, which make us more stressed, which then activate neural networks, which get us thinking about all the different times in our past and the associations that we have to that stressful moment, which then create more negative emotions. And you get the idea, right? The loop goes on. And so in the case of the tiger out in the savannah, the thought that we have is, well, I would rather not get killed by a tiger, right? And so the beliefs that pop up automatically is that we know from past experiences as a hunter-gatherer ancestor that, well, tigers are dangerous and Russell in the bushes is bad and we better prepare for the worst. Those are all those subconscious beliefs that thought stems from. And with the emotional brain, instead of saying, I don't want to get killed by a tiger, we have the thought that goes off that says, well, I don't want to get fired at work. And so the belief pops up that says from our childhood that we learned, it's better to stay quiet. Hard work keeps you safe. And you better prepare for the worst. So today, we're stuck in these feedback cycle loops based on the emotional stress that we're experiencing, not only in the workplace, but also in life in general. And the strange thing is that when a physical threat was over, like when we realized that the tiger in the bushes is not actually a tiger, but just a cute little baby bunny rabbit, really easy for the brain to recognize that that threat is gone. But with emotional stress, our brain has a much tougher time of being able to tell the difference of what's the end of this emotional event. Has this emotional stress ended yet or not, right? And so what happens? Well, we tend to allow our thoughts to continue making all these crazy predictions about future circumstances. And when we think in that manner of predicting the worst case scenario, we program our brain for the worst case scenario as a way to prepare, even if it doesn't happen. I call this the reacting feedback loop. This is the unconscious loop that goes on where our emotions and our hormones and our thoughts are all intertwined around a single thing. So again, all those thoughts then create emotions, which create a physiological response in the body with hormones being released. It's a mind-body feedback loop between our emotions and our thoughts and our physiological responses. And everything in this case, when we talk about the reaction loop, everything is being driven by the original emotion. Emotions are what are determining what the body and the brain do, and then the subsequent thoughts that result out of that, so on and so forth. And then this is where we get to burnout, right? We eventually get to the point where so much of the energy is required for our stress response that we're not just exhausted, but you don't even have the mental capacity to think clearly. And so for anybody out there that's on the call today, if you're ever in that place of like, for example, you're like, oh my gosh, I really don't like my job and I really want to find a new job, but you don't even have the energy to look for a new job right now. So if that's you, I promise you it's not just you. It's just what's happening in your brain and body. And the other part too is that your cup is already full. And so even those slightest little things can throw you over the edge. You might sometimes think to yourself like, oh my gosh, these types of things never used to irritate me this much. Well, it's because you never had to worry this much about your cup being this full all the time. So that's kind of where we're at today and why we're stuck is three big things. Number one, our decision making is impaired because remember that when we're in a fight or flight mode with stress, the emotional brain is on high alert. It's taking all the energy, which means the logical thinking brain, the prefrontal cortex, is turned all the way down. This is where brain fog comes into play. This is where it's so hard to make those decisions of what to do next. And then we don't even have the energy to pursue our goals. So a lot of us don't even have goals anymore because it's not that we don't want to change, but we just don't have the energy to change. And the worst part of this all is that those subconscious narratives, the sabotaging limiting narratives that we talked about from 0 to 10 years old that get programmed in us, talk us out of change. Right? So this is kind of where we are right now. Let me check the Q&A because I think a lot of you had some really good questions in here as well. Yes, Morgan, the recording will be available. afterwards. And then Vashi, how do we reprogram negative emotions, adrenaline to be positive? So yeah, that's what we're going to talk about a little bit today. And then we're going to dive deeper into that, especially in next week's session as well. But here's the thing, y'all, is that this is where we get to this whole idea of stress addiction, is that it's not you that's addicted to stress. It's that your brain has unconsciously become addicted to stress, because your brain has been programmed to associate your level of stress. Oh, here come the hand clap reactions. Your brain has been programmed to associate your level of stress to your value and identity. We have told ourselves, because we were taught to believe it as true from a young age, that the more that I do, the more valuable that I am. And even though it's not what I want, at least it's gotten me to where I am right now. So we have now unconsciously talked ourselves into telling ourselves the story that stressing ourselves out to achieve success and happiness is much easier than any other option, if we're even aware of any other option. Remember that your brain is all about patterns and habits, right? So it is learned based on the amount of actual stressful experiences we've all had over the years, all of these unprecedented historical events. Our brains have set up a pattern to anticipate stress and to run the stress program in the background, even when nothing else is going on, as a way to ensure our highest chance of survival. So if you're one of those people where you're like, okay, I'm just going to lay down, or maybe you even have like one day of the weekend where you're like, oh, finally, I don't feel stressed. But then you feel really weird too, because you're like, wait a second, this feels weird. This is not how I usually operate. Well, that's why, is because our brains have gotten into such a pattern and a habit of realizing stress is the norm that it's running by default in the background unconsciously, even without us knowing it. Yeah, Tahini, you put it, Tahina, I hope I'm saying your name right. You put it good here. You need to work hard to earn respect. Resting is lazy, and being lazy makes you lose respect. So you don't even accept yourself. Oh man, that's good. But I want to just get you in here. You can do the rest of this. Without stress, my brain goes, yeah, exactly. Without stress, our brain goes into boredom mode, because it's like, wait a second, I'm not being overloaded with the same stimulus that I'm so used to. And so another way that this might show up for you is that when you are relaxing for 5 minutes and then you can't help but to go grab your phone and go back on TikTok, because your brain is so used to information overload and stimulus overload that it's like, wait a second, I kind of missed that. And so it talks you into going out and seeking out those stimulus overload. And it all goes back to the programming. It all goes back to what we talked about with that amygdala that quickly processes fear, anxiety, stress, and threat. And you might ask, well, how does it know whether something is a stress or a threat for us? Well, it all goes back to those beliefs that have been programmed in us that are so often running unconsciously in the back of our minds. Get this. Here's a fascinating little fact for you as well. The only two fears that we're born with are a fear of fire and a fear of falling. Those are the only two fears that most scientists would agree that we're born with. Everything else is how your brain has conditioned itself based on your past experiences. And for many millennials, what does that mean? Well, we've been through enough and exposed to enough negative experiences that our program is extremely sensitive to stress and anxiety. And those subconscious beliefs and our past experiences are the very thing that are programming our response to stress. And so I like to think about it as a rock splash and the ripple effects. The rock splash is the objective stress event, but it goes on for us. It continues to last because of all those ripple effects known as our subconscious beliefs that then create and predict those worst case scenarios. So this is what's really going on when we talk about an addiction to stress. It is not your fault that society, capitalism, the world in general causes emotions like stress and anxiety. And it's not your fault that your brain has created this default program where the predictable pattern is stress. It's to be expected, right? Based on the fact that humans have always had this negativity bias. And now for us, it's just being compounded by what we've been exposed to over the last 20 years. It's not your fault that your brain and your amygdala are designed the way that they are. But change is hard. Why? Because we lose the ability to predict our future. Let that sink in for a second. It's uncomfortable regardless of our present state of being. But again, it's not our fault that all those things happen. But if you're going to take back control of the program and you want to make meaningful change, it is our responsibility. By making sure that our brain knows that it's safe to relax and then to approach the carrot, to intentionally focus on the good so that your brain creates more useful neural networks and eventually programs your brain with those new beliefs. So the short-term solution here is to get at the root of burnout. We need to regulate our nervous system first, because in order to turn on that higher order thinking brain to really do some of this mindset inner work, well, right now the emotional brain's on high alert, right? So we need to calm that down first. So that's going to be our short-term solution next week, is regulating our nervous system. The long-term solution that we're going to dive into in the last 2 weeks is going to be addressing the sabotaging beliefs, the unconscious thoughts of where is all that really stemming from, and being able to rewire the associated neural networks. But again, we can't do that work when our higher order thinking reflective brain is not turned on all the way. So it's not going to be easy, I will say that much, but it takes time. New habits, most scientists would agree that it takes about 30 days to train your brain into a new habit. And then it takes about 60 days for that habit to become a bit more automated, right? And in about 90 days and beyond, depending on how much focus you give it, right, you're going to be able to have a new unconscious program that your mind can refer to when it's creating your default patterns. In other words, at 90 days and beyond, you begin to move from reacting to creating. You like that? I was kind of impressed with that one as I came up with it. In other words, your reality doesn't have to be dictated by circumstances, okay? Instead, it can be dictated by intention, where we go from a life of life happens to me to life happens for me. So that's what we're going to dive into. I know I'm a little bit over time here, so I apologize. But that's what we're going to get into next week is, first of all, how do we reverse the fight or flight mode? And then the 2 weeks after that, then we'll dive into that mindset work where things are going to get really interesting and fast. But I don't want to leave you all with nothing today. So 2 habits that I'm going to have you take with you into next week and bring back with you when you come back next Thursday. Okay. The first one is a habit to regulate your nervous system. In other words, to hack your parasympathetic nervous system, which is your rest and relax. And it's called vagal breathing. And so the background behind this is that one of the longest nerves in your body is called your vagus nerve. It stretches from your brain all the way down to your gut. And this is part of your parasympathetic nervous system. And so anytime that this vagus nerve is activated, it sends messages back and forth between your brain and the body, which regulate your breathing, your heart rate, so on and so forth. And the way that it works is that you simply breathe in through your nose. And then as you breathe out through pursed lips, like you're blowing through a straw, sort of, right? And well, you might say, well, why would I do it that way? Well, when you're breathing out slower through pursed lips, you're activating your diaphragm and your abdomen. And when you're activating your diaphragm and abdomen by breathing out slower, that's going to activate that vagus nerve that goes from your gut up to your head or up to your brain. So we're going to try this out right now, just so you can get a feel for it. And then anytime over the next week, whenever you're feeling like overwhelmed, when you're feeling like, oh my God, my stress cup is completely filled up to the top, you can try this out on your own. Okay. So we're going to do it 3 times. You're going to breathe in through your nose and then breathe slowly out through pursed lips. Y'all ready? Here we go. First time, breathe in through your nose and out through pursed lips. Number 2, breathe in through your nose. And out through pursed lips. Last time, in through your nose. And try to breathe out even slower through pursed lips. And let your shoulders drop at the end. Allow that breath to be fully released. And so again, you might feel some tingling. You might feel your heart rate decrease a little bit there. And again, all you're doing here is you're hacking that vagus nerve in order to send that message. Instead of it going from your brain to your body, it goes from your body to your brain. That made me yawn. I'm gonna take a nap after this. So that's the first habit, to get into just simple things, right? Uh, Shannon, that's funny. The second habit that I want you all to try out is a simple habit. It's a stress journal. Okay. And so this can be a hard copy journal, but it doesn't have to be. It can also just be on your phone. And what I want you to do is that anytime that you experience a stressful event in the next week, before you come back next week, I just want you to jot down, what was the event? And then in the second column, so the best way to do this is like two different columns, a column for the stressful event, and then a column for what were the thoughts that came up for you. See if you can begin to identify what are the subconscious thoughts that are arising from that stressful event. Because the idea here is that over these until we get to the mindset piece, you can begin doing some of the work right now to begin to identify what are some of the patterns that are happening with your thoughts. Because when you identify the thought patterns, then you can begin to identify, oh yeah, that's all stemming from the belief that says XYZ about me and the world around me, right? So Christina's journaling stresses me. Journaling stresses me out. Do it in a way that works for you. It could just be on your phone, and maybe it's just doing it at the end of the day in general. Well, maybe don't do it at the end of the day, because you don't want the last thing that you think about to be stress. But find a spot in the middle of your day, maybe, where you can just jot down just a couple things, the stressful event, and then the belief or the thoughts that popped up for you. I'm going to get to the Q&As here in just a moment at the end. But before we do that, surprise, surprise, it is giveaway time. So to thank all of you who are here in person, one of the ways, and by the way, I don't mean this to sound like I want to like sell you on something by any means, but one of the things that I also do in addition to my programs is I created a annual planner. So it's called the Mindset Makeover Annual Planner, and it's undated, which is the nice thing. So you don't have to like worry about having to buy a new one at the beginning of every year. So the way that's framed, I don't know if hopefully y'all can see this here. The way that it's framed is each week you're going to start off with an inspirational quote that's around mindset. And then you've got your mini milestone goal. And so instead of having to focus on like this big audacious goal, putting down what's your mini milestone goal for the week. And then you've got your usual planner here, which is specifically designed to not be overwhelming. And then over here, you've got your habit tracker for each week of habits that you want to keep up with and hold yourself accountable to. And then this is the journaling piece for each week, where you're beginning to identify what are the things that are stressing you out and what might be some of those subconscious limiting beliefs that are stemming from that. And then, wait, I'm not done yet, because the best part is every about 4 weeks, you're also going to have a monthly reflection where you're reflecting on your goals, your progress, and who doesn't love an adult coloring book page as well? Because that's, in my opinion, one of the best darn things you can do to de-stress. So here's what we're going to do. I'm going to have you all put in the chat, and I'm just going to pick one of you. And we have 104 people on right now, 104 attendees. Woo! I'm going to have everybody pick a number between 1 and 104. Put it in the chat, and then I'm just going to pick somebody's number. Oh, gosh, there's a lot. Man, you guys are fast. Okay, number 9. Brittany Moussard, I believe is how you say your name. You pick number 9, so I'm going to pick the 9th person on my attendee list, which is, give me a second, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. Andrienne Jodoin. Andrienne, I'm writing your name down so that I remember it for later. Andrienne, I hope I'm saying your name right. If you are on here, let me know in the chats. So that way you're not surprised when I send you the email after this. There we go. Okay, perfect. Oh, I'm glad I pronounced it right as well. So I will be sending you a link where you're going to be able to basically just input your shipping information, and you can, it's through Amazon is where you order them from. For anybody else, though, again, not trying to sell anybody on anything, but if you want an accompaniment, obviously this series is completely free of charge. But if you want something to kind of go along with it, feel free to pick up your own copy of the Mindset Makeover Annual Planner as well. I have it in hardcover as well as a soft cover as well, where you can get it on the Amazon. So that's our giveaway for the week. We'll have more giveaways the next 3 weeks as well. But the last thing that I just wanted to also remind you all of as we begin to wrap up here is the where we're headed next with this. And so if you are ready to begin to become part of kind of that bigger community, again, my big thing with the Millennial Reset and forming this new membership community is to be able to create that space for community and conversation, because again, it's not just you and it's not just a me thing, right? And so I really wanted to be able to not only have a space where people can come and feel safe, but to also have, instead of just having like these one-off workshops, I wanted to create something where people feel like they can drop in whenever. And so part of my membership programs is monthly series that are going to be going on every month, as well as a monthly group coaching workshop. And so the first one that's going to be happening in July, for example, is just a 1-hour group coaching workshop on how to hack your motivation. And so all of that you're going to get for free in the membership, as well as access to all of my full online courses. The courses themselves, I mean, they're not like ridiculously charged or anything like that. I only charge like $70, but the membership, if you guys want to sign up early, I'm putting the link in the chat here for everybody. You can either do a monthly membership. It's usually $15.97, or an annual membership. But if you use the code either reset month or reset year, you're going to get 33% off. And so that is as cheap as $9.97 a month for you to be able to have full access to the courses, free access to all the programs that are going to be happening going forward, as well as the group coaching sessions. Don't feel pressured if you're not ready for it. Like I said, don't want you all to feel pressured by any means. But if you do want to get a head start on things, I am doing for the first 200 only the 33% off. Okay. So if you want to do that now today and kind of get in at that locked in price, and that stays like that forever. So you don't have to worry about it like going up after a month or whatever. You can lock in that rate for yourself if you're interested. Cool. All right. I'm going to leave that up, and I'm going to stay on the line here to answer any of the Q&A. So if anybody else has any other questions, feel free to put them in the Q&A box. Otherwise, our next session is going to be same time next Thursday, where we're going to dive into the regulation work, giving you all the brain science of what's happening in your brain and body when you begin to put into habits to regulate your nervous system. Cool. So if you all want to drop off, you're welcome to drop off before Q&A. But thank you all so much again. I did not expect this big of a group, and I am so honored and thrilled, and I cannot wait to see you all hopefully next week. Getting to some of the Q&A though. You bet. Thank you all. You guys are too kind. The replay, Andy, I'll send it out tomorrow morning. Tomorrow morning is when the recording will be sent out. All right, let me see if I can catch up here on some of these. There's a good question in the chat here. Does it ever become second nature to stay positive, or is it constant work to remind yourself to look at the positive? This is a really great question, and it kind of gets into what we're going to be talking about with the mindset piece as well. But by the negativity bias is built into us. And so by default, the brain is always going to prioritize negative over positive to keep us safe and alive. However, what you can do by all means is to train your brain so that, like we mentioned, instead of it being glue for the bad and oil for the good, at least you can make the oil a little bit less slippery by training your brain to be able to be more receptive, so that when you're creating a perception in your mind, it's based on a different perspective, a different set of beliefs. So that's what we're going to talk about with that mindset piece. But is it possible to be positive all the time? No, because our brain's negativity bias is there to keep us safe. Cindy, I do not have an electronic copy of it yet, but I will. Somebody else mentioned that, and it's on my to-do list in the next couple of weeks here. With a membership, how personal will the coaching be? So it's going to be group coaching, but it'll be, instead of like having it on a webinar like this, it'll be a meeting format. So it'll be more of a conversation type of thing, instead of just like a general, facilitation of things. And it's also going to be based on members' recommendations. So if you're like, I really want a workshop on how I can stop procrastination, all of the workshops are highly driven by members. Is it possible to continue to thrive in your career without burning out? Like, can you do both, prioritizing your mental health and being a boss? Yeah, of course. But the thing is that you have to be, a lot of people will say, well, I'm going to go on vacation because that's what's going to give me the break so that I can dive back into the next thing in my life with more energy. But the thing is that the vacation is just a short-term gain for the long-term pain. If you really want to do the long-term gain, then you have to go through the short-term pain of being able to, number one, regulate your nervous system so you can get back into a state of balance, and then being able to understand what or where is the burnout actually coming from. Because if it's coming from your work environment, that's a whole other thing. But if it is coming from that mindset piece, the beliefs, which it is for so many, then by all means, you can still do your job. Once you create that awareness around where it's all stemming from, it's going to be that much easier for you to be able to address some of those things, even while you're still working and experiencing your environmental stress that you have. Thank you all so much for those comments. I appreciate it. I think that got all the questions answered, but let me just go through the chat here. Elvia, that's cheaper than Spotify family plan. Yes, that was my goal. I don't want to charge people a bunch of hundreds of dollars for something. I want it to be affordable and I want it to be meaningful for them as well. So that's my goal. All right, y'all. Well, if there's any other questions, I'll stick around and keep my eye on the chat and the Q&A here. But again, thank you all so much for attending, and can't wait to see y'all next week. See you Thursday.